I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Senator Sherrod Brown voiced his support for Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell on the Senate floor Thursday. The Ohio senator also blamed inflation on, quote, corporate greed, a global pandemic, and Putin's war. Across the aisle, Republicans in recent weeks have blamed the Biden administration's policies for rising costs. Here's more from Senator Brown.
President.
Senator from Ohio.
Yeah, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that I am able to complete my remarks, which will be brief.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since President Biden took office, we've made tremendous economic progress as a country. Our economic growth last year exceeded that of China for the first time in 20 years. Federal Reserve nominees that have come before the Senate are crucial to continuing that progress. As Americans face rising prices caused by corporate greed, a global pandemic, and Putin's war, having a full Federal Reserve Board has never been more vital. A few weeks ago, the Senate confirmed Lael Brainerd to be Vice Chair of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. Vice Chair Brainerd has served as a member of the Federal Reserve since 2014, when she led bipartisan action to support families through the COVID-19 economic crisis, and she's worked to create a better payment system that works for consumers and small banks. She's championed efforts to modernize and strengthen the Community Reinvestment Act, a landmark civil rights law, to start to undo the dark legacy brought on by Jim Crow and ultimately redlining. We saw her tremendous efforts pay off. Last week, all three federal banking agencies moved forward with their new historic CRA proposal. Earlier this week, Democrats supported the historic nomination of Dr. Lisa Cook, a prominent economist with years of research and international experience on monetary policy, banking, and financial crises. She is the first black woman to serve on the Board of Governors in the 109-year history of the Federal Reserve. She's seen how economic policy affects all kinds of people in different parts of the country, from the rural South, where she grew up in Milledgeville, Georgia, to the industrial Midwest at Michigan State University, one of the great Midwestern state universities in this country, where she built her career. Dr. Cook is a Spelman College alumna. She was a Marshall Scholar and a Truman Scholar. She studied at Oxford University. She earned her PhD in economics at Berkeley. She's a tenured professor of economics and international relations at Michigan State. Last night, the Senate confirmed Dr. Philip Jefferson, one of the country's leading thinkers on the economics of poverty. He'll be a critical voice on the Fed. He's the Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dean of Faculty, and Freeland Professor of Economics at Davidson College. He began his career as a Fed economist, grew up in, as he says, in the shadow of RFK Stadium in the southeast part of this city, and he served as chair of the economic department at Swarthmore College, my daughter Emily's alma mater. Dr. Jefferson would be only the fourth black man to serve as a Fed governor. Both Dr. Jefferson and Dr. Cook will bring important perspectives on poverty and inequality and racial equity to the Fed, perspectives that have been missing for most of the last 109 years. Today we'll vote on Jerome Powell, who's earned the opportunity to lead the Fed as chair for another term. He's been a steadfast defender of the Federal Reserve's independence, resisting unprecedented attacks by former President Trump to politicize the Fed, and I know he'll similarly resist those in Congress who see inflation not as a burden on American families, but it's a chance to blame the President of the United States for something that is complex, due chiefly to things that happened before he was president, and mainly to corporate greed and global events. Along with now Vice Chair Brainerd, he played an instrumental role in stabilizing our economy in the face of the coronavirus pandemic. He's been a reliable voice and a steady hand through this crisis. All of the nominees for the Fed have received an unprecedented amount of support from across the political spectrum, more letters of endorsement than I've ever seen for Federal Reserve nominees, from state regulators and economists and bankers and former government officials, consumer groups, civil rights advocates, and on and on and on. I congratulate Vice Chair Brainerd and Governor Cook and Governor Jefferson on their nominations and confirmations. I urge my colleagues to vote to confirm Chair Powell. And last point, Mr. Chair, Mr. President, I'll continue to work with my colleagues to round out the full complement of the Federal Reserve. It's not had a full 7 members in almost a decade. When we confirm in a few weeks the Vice Chair of Supervision nominee, Michael Barr. The Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee will hold a hearing on Mr. Barr's nomination next week. We'll move swiftly to vote. I urge my colleagues to support Chair Powell today and to support Mr. Barr's nomination as Vice Chair soon. I'm confident all the President's nominees will fiercely guard the Fed's independence, will work to bring down prices, and put workers, most importantly, put workers and families at the center of our economic policy. Mr. President, I yield the floor.